$84 trillion is set to change hands over the next 20 years. Whether you're passing it down or inheriting it, the decisions you make today will shape your family's financial future for generations. Welcome to the Great Wealth Transfer, where David Pulcini, CFP, guides you through the strategies, insights, and pitfalls of navigating one of the largest financial shifts in history. What you don't know could redefine your legacy.
Today we're going to talk about what if the beneficiary does not want the inheritance that you might be leaving, or maybe you're the beneficiary that doesn't want the inheritance yourself, right? So there's a great quote by Epictetus that says, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. And isn't that the truth? The happiest people that I meet really want for nothing. These are the people, everybody knows them, that are difficult to shop for. You don't know what to get them for their birthday or Christmas or whatever holiday it is. You can never seem to find something for these folks and picture that person. Mostly, in many cases, because they just really don't want anything. And many of them will say, if I wanted it, I'll just go buy it myself and I don't need it as a gift, right? So in having few wants, what I have seen and observed is these folks are in turn happy. They want for nothing, right? And most of them are minimalists. They don't want stuff. They feel burdened by it. So what does this have to do with the great wealth transfer? I would say a lot. Most people spend decades building wealth, but not everybody wants to inherit it. And the idea of refusing an inheritance to some people might seem unthinkable, but it does happen. I've just been talking to folks this morning, and I might be on one side, and a lot of other folks will say, how could you not want an inheritance? And I think it's a psychological thing that we're going to dive into today. And I want to dive into why someone might decline an inheritance, the emotional and financial complexities behind it, and what options exist when an heir doesn't want the money. And most of the time, folks, like it or not, they don't want the stuff, okay? We're going to walk through 4 key reasons on why beneficiaries may reject an inheritance, including behavioral finance aspects and a real life scenario of inheriting from an in-law and experiencing guilt, right? So let's talk about Lisa and Mark. This is a real life scenario. I changed the names, and you, as we go through this as the listener, just think of your own scenario. Who might you be inheriting money from, or who might you be leaving it to? It will be, I think it's interesting to uncover what your own thoughts might be around this. And the entire point of this is let's plan for this now, based on not just the assets and the money, but also the feelings and the psychology behind it. Okay, back to my real life example. Lisa and Mark, married couple, they're in their 50s. They recently inherited $1 million from Mark's father, okay? They are also inheriting 60 years of stuff that Mark's dad has accumulated, and they are hesitant to accept the money, and they feel really guilty about not wanting his stuff, okay? And their reasons for this are emotional, they are financial, and in many cases, it could actually be strategic. And Mark and Lisa represent a growing number of people who face this dilemma, okay? So you might be asking, why would someone say no to inheriting money or the possessions, right? And I'm going to give some reasons right now. Number one, the emotional burden of the money. Many people attach deep emotions to money, especially when it comes from a deceased loved one. Some inheritances feel more like a burden than a blessing, and we've talked about that before. Let's talk about loss aversion theory and what that means. Loss aversion theory suggests that people often focus more on avoiding negatives than maximizing gains, okay? So what is the loss aversion theory? It is a concept in behavioral finance and psychology that explains why people tend to prefer avoiding losses rather than acquiring the equivalent gain, okay? And I'm gonna give you a real life example, but people feel the pain of a loss more intensely than the pleasure of a gain of the same size. So think of this. Losing $100 feels more painful than the joy of finding $100 for most people, okay? You might disagree with that. Most people feel that way. So loss aversion can lead to irrational financial decisions, such as holding on to losing investments too long, or avoiding unnecessary risks, or necessary risks, I should say, or rejecting money due to emotional attachments. Okay, so how does this apply to an inheritance? If an inheritance comes from a loved one, the recipient might feel like spending or investing the money is losing the connection to that person. Okay, so the example is if Mark's dad left him a rental property in addition to the money, Mark might feel like selling it is an emotional betrayal, even if he doesn't want the property or the responsibility, okay? Another thing is fear of financial mistakes. Some beneficiaries refuse an inheritance because they fear losing it due to bad investment choices. They might think, hey, if I don't take it, I won't mess it up. That's real. And not wanting to lose family harmony is another reason. And we all know this. We all have unfortunate stories. Siblings or folks that are inheriting money often fight over that money, and it just creates stress and conflict that a lot of people don't want to deal with. A beneficiary may reject an inheritance to avoid drama and preserve the family relationship. Okay, so that loss aversion theory makes people focus on the downside of the inheritance rather than the potential benefits. It's one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reason, people struggle with making rational financial choices, especially when emotions are involved and they get a lump sum of money and that stuff, okay? If money reminds folks of grief or creates conflict within a family, they may just reject it to avoid all of that. So my example again, back to Lisa. Lisa's father-in-law. So Lisa and Mark were married as Mark's dad. Lisa's father-in-law was a self-made businessman who always believed in financial independence. Lisa feels, as the in-law, uneasy about inheriting any portion of his wealth because she worries it conflicts with his values, especially since she really never had a close relationship with him, okay? She feels guilt accepting money from a person she struggled to connect with in life, okay? An alternative solution for Lisa and Mark could be to redirect that inheritance toward a cause their father-in-law believed in, such as setting up a donor-advised fund in his name, okay? Just an FYI here, I have some solutions for each of these items. The truth is, as we all know, there's much more to it. In reality, yes, Lisa and Mark can set up a fund in Mark's father's name, but will they do it? Probably not. It's a process and it's a lot to go through. And if they get $1 million, are they really going to do that? Usually no. If you inherit $1 million from a parent and truly do not want it, my advice from seeing this over and over again is get it into your name and just wait. There's no hurry. Take your time. Mark's dad, and I maybe happen to know him or knew him, most likely would be proud of Mark for paying off the debt and investing the money. He would be happy to see his son and his son's family and his grandkids put that money to good use. That's why the dad saved and wanted to give that money to them, okay? When the right people inherit this type of money, they want to grow it. They want to take that financial asset of the family member and they want to double it or triple it or 10x it, okay? That's the right person inheriting the money. They want to take it and they want to grow that legacy. For the right inheritor, it can be a catalyst to creating something even more meaningful for their own children, the grandkids of the person who left it in this example, okay? Let me ask you something that might be slightly depressing, and I do understand this, and I heard this, and it just sticks with me. Think about this in your own head right now. What are your grandparents' names? Right? You could probably name your grandparents. What about your great-grandparents? What about their parents? That's where you usually lose people, right? Do you know your great-great-grandparents' full names on all sides? My advice for this is make this count now. They're most likely not going to remember you, but smart decisions can last generations. If we do it right, they will remember you. I do work with some folks that the family tree created wealth, passed it down, did things right. They remember their great-great-grandparents as being very smart folks that set the family up the right way, okay? Back to our list here. Number 2, why would we not want an inheritance? Financial liabilities and the burden of stuff. Okay? Not all inheritances are straightforward gifts. Some come with hidden financial strings attached. Okay? So debt obligations. Let me give you some potential pitfalls. Debt obligations. If the inheritance includes real estate, it might also come with property taxes, maintenance costs, or outstanding mortgages. I see this all the time, and maybe folks are not equipped to handle that. tax burdens. In some cases, inheriting assets could trigger an estate tax. That limit's very high, but for some folks that could start triggering estate tax. There could be capital gains taxes or income taxes that the recipient may not want to deal with or know how to deal with, right? And then there's the physical possessions. So heirs might inherit a house full of furniture. This happens all the time, and you guys all know somebody. You inherit a house full of furniture, collectibles, sentimental items that folks don't want, they don't need, or they just don't know how to deal with it, okay? Recent wildfires in Los Angeles, one of the celebrity quotes was, his house burned down, unfortunately, and it's terrible. But he literally said, "I've been freed from the burden of my stuff." I can't even imagine saying that, but that's the first thing that came to that guy's head. So let me give you an example. Mark's father owned a rental property out of state. Very common right now. Think of snowbirds owning houses somewhere else. If Mark accepts the house, Mark will be responsible for that upkeep, the taxes, the tenant issues. Since Mark and Lisa together have no experience in real estate, they would consider declining the inheritance or selling it immediately to avoid financial risk, okay? In 99% of cases, again, a step back here, it would make sense to take the house, get a step up in basis, which we've talked about before, and sell it if they don't want to deal with it. This minimizes taxes, minimizes the upkeep, and gets the most money to Mark and Lisa and their family, which I'm assuming in this case, Mark's dad would have wanted, right? So what about dealing with the stuff that comes with an inheritance? We get this all the time. Beyond financial assets, many people inherit physical possessions, and this can be emotionally and logistically overwhelming. What are you going to do with it all, right? So common challenges that people face, I've mentioned this, a house filled with furniture, collectibles, I'm going to call it outdated belongings that no one in the family wants, and disputes among siblings over who gets what, even for things with little monetary value, occur all the time. And then there's the emotional toll of sorting through a lifetime of memories, making it hard to part with, right? So how to handle this? Literally prioritize what matters. Keep the items with deep sentimental value or practical use, right? Tools, other things. Again, I see this all the time. Digitize things. I say this at my own house. Why do we have all this? Well, I can get rid of that sweater. I'll just take a picture of it and then I'll remember that I had it, right? Everyone has those things that they've kept forever. But sentimental items like photos, letters, documents, scan them, take photos, preserve them without having physical clutter, okay? You can sell it, donate it, liquidate it, valuable assets, antiques, collectibles, artwork. They can all be appraised and sold, okay? Furniture, clothing, that can be donated to charities or given to those in need. Estate sale professionals can help, and they can handle liquidation if there's a large volume of belongings, okay? So there are third parties that can help, and this also helps create that emotional distance. Estate clean-out services, we've had someone on our previous podcast about this. Estate clean-out services can help families handle the process without the emotional attachment that makes decision-making difficult, right? So again, back to our example, Lisa is just overwhelmed by the massive collection of old books, furniture, and memorabilia that Mark's father left behind. And while some of it has financial value, most of it, truthfully, is just clutter. And to avoid family drama and stress, they decide to hire an estate sale company to handle everything. And they donate a portion of the proceeds to charity in his father's name. So how many of you, I want you to think about this again for yourself, or your own parents, have the equivalent of, let's call it 50 plus junk drawers? They have screws and bolts from 1977, right? They have a collection of used vehicles, tools that have accumulated over 50 years that these guys just won't get rid of. And I'll say the guys on that one, right? So, and I know you're picturing somebody right now because we have this. How does your beneficiary, if you're the one leaving it, accept this graciously without telling you or without hurting your feelings? That's tough. And if you're getting it, you don't want to feel guilty, but you also don't want it. So how are you going to handle that, or not handle it, I guess? It's just another thought. So number 3, reason why somebody wouldn't want an inheritance: personal wealth and tax strategies. Sometimes the person inheriting money already has substantial assets, and accepting the inheritance could just complicate their financial situation, right? Behavioral finance insight here. High net worth individuals may decline an inheritance to avoid increased estate taxes when passing their own wealth down to their children, okay? Some prefer to redirect the inheritance, which we'll get into, to reduce tax exposure. So back to our example again, Lisa and Mark already have a $10 million estate, let's say. If they accept an additional $1 million or more, tax laws change. I'm not going to get into that on this one, but they may face higher estate taxes based on their state that they live in or the federal rates at that time when they try to pass that wealth on to their children. So they may consider disclaiming the inheritance, which means the money would pass directly from, in this case, Mark's dad to Mark and Lisa's children. Okay? Disclaimer. It's called a disclaimer inheritance. Passes down, skips a generation. There's all sorts of stuff we'll get into with that later. But instead of outright rejecting the money, they could work with a financial advisor and estate planning attorney to use gifting strategies or charitable donations to reduce their overall tax burden. Okay? Then number 4 here. Fourth reason to not want, or why people don't want an inheritance in some cases, philosophical or ethical benefits about money. Some individuals simply don't believe in inheriting wealth or inherited wealth or feel comfortable receiving money that they didn't earn. This really resonates. So, and I know a lot of listeners out there feel the same way, and some don't, but common beliefs that lead to rejecting this, it could be, I want to build my own financial success. I don't believe in passing down wealth. It can create entitlement, right? Money should go to charity instead of staying in the family. Some folks feel that way, okay? Lisa and Mark's son, Jake, will say he's in his early 30s. He's built a successful career. He tells them he doesn't want the family money because he believes wealth should be earned, not given, okay? He urges his parents to donate a portion of causes they care about instead. So it's interesting because Mark's and Lisa's son in this case, if he inherits that money, which he may not be able to help it, sometimes he has to, and then he can do with it what he wants. But I do hear this phrase often, the folks that need it the least deserve it the most. That would be like him in this case, Jake. He's in his 30s, already successful, says he doesn't want it. That, by default, in my opinion, makes him more entitled to it, right? So what do we do? So Mark and Lisa could set up a charitable foundation in their family name or establish a structured trust that aligns with their values while still supporting future generations, right? So what are your actual options if you don't want an inheritance? If you are in a position where you don't want or can't accept for some reason, here's what you can do. All right, we'll go through these quickly. You can disclaim the inheritance. Let it pass on to the next beneficiary. This is a legal process where you literally refuse the inheritance in writing, allowing it to go to, we'll call it the next person in line. You must disclaim it before taking possessions of any assets. And you cannot dictate where it goes. It follows the original estate plan, okay? That's where an estate planning attorney would come in. You could redirect it to charity. You can work with an estate attorney, again, to assign the inheritance to a charitable foundation, a donor-advised fund, or just a cause you support, okay? Use it strategically. If you don't want the money for personal reasons, but you don't want to waste it, consider using it to create a long-term impact. Scholarships, impact investing, the business. It could be an influx of cash into your business that's growing, or maybe you start a new business. The folks that are leaving this money behind would, in most cases, would be very proud of any of those, right? You could convert it into a trust for future generations. If you don't need the money, but you want it to serve a purpose, a trust, again, can ensure it's used responsibly over time, and you can set the rules. We had a different episode on that. So my final thoughts here. Inheriting money, it isn't always a gift, and sometimes it's a burden, and it's good for the folks on both sides to talk about that, okay? And you don't know, especially I see this all the time, guys, when it comes from an in-law, the folks just feel guilty that are inheriting it. I do run into that. Is it nice to get $5 million? Sure. Do the in-laws in most cases feel guilty? Almost every time. We should talk about that, okay? Money carries emotion. Sometimes inheritance brings that guilt, the grief, or added responsibility, and taxes and obligations also matter. Not all inheritances are free money, okay? You do have options. If you don't want an inheritance, you can legally direct it. We've talked about that. So here's our call to action. If you or your family are facing tough decisions about an inheritance, we're here to help. Reach out to 6 Point Financial Partners. We discuss these strategies all the time that can align with our clients' goals. A lot of times we meet with folks just to be a sounding board. They don't have to become clients. Most times we can say, hey, this, and this are out of line. Go meet with an attorney if you need help from the advising standpoint. We're here. If not, I'm glad I helped you go in the right direction, okay? Next episode, should you give it to your beneficiaries now while you are alive, or should you wait? They're going to get it anyway, right? Make it a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Great Wealth Transfer Podcast. If this podcast resonates with you, reach out to 6 Point Financial Partners at 585-485-6048 or email dpulcini@6pointfp.com.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. Information here is provided in part by third-party sources. These sources are generally deemed to be reliable. However, neither 6 Point Financial Partners, Private Client Services, nor RFG Advisory guarantee the accuracy of third-party sources. The views expressed here are those of 6 Point Financial Partners. They do not necessarily represent those of Private Client Services, RFG Advisory, their employees, or their clients. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by 6 Point Financial Partners or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives through Private Client Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory LLC, RFG Advisory, or RFG. A registered investment advisor. Private Client Services, 6 Point Financial Partners, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.